in the United States?
Well, it's not a great topic because, of course, I don't believe in amnesty. But I think more importantly, we have to start repealing the mandates that attract illegals here in the first place. The first and the biggest mandate is birthright citizenship, which was implemented with the 14th Amendment. That's something that we can just excise. We can excise that birthright citizenship clause out of the 14th Amendment. All the other mandates that attract folks here to live a better life, I think we can cut them off. We are losing hospitals in all these border towns all along the Southwest because they're being overrun with people demanding and requesting services. And I think that we need to also take to task the United States government for not doing a better job in getting legal immigration more streamlined and more effective. We have to have a good system that rewards people for getting in line, and we cannot reward people who don't. And one other thing I would mention, I've made a little proposal. You know, many of us have seen that email that's gone around about how LA County jails are filled with illegal immigrants, and a lot of hospital services are consumed by illegal immigrants. Well, I have this idea. I say what we do is let LA County, for example, find out the nation of origin of each of the people, the illegal immigrants that they are giving services to. They should find out what their cost is, add a little premium, and then take the bill and send it to, for example, Mexico. Mexico will stiff them. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of foreign aid, so then I say what we do is we send that invoice over to the State Department, have them pay the bill, and deduct it from the $600 million a year we give to Mexico in foreign aid.
Assuming you oppose earmarks, how would you defend the charge that you have not delivered to your home constituency in San Francisco?
Process. You know, earmarks are a very tiny percentage of the budget. And I think people don't understand that if you cut every single earmark, every single one, it would have zero impact on the budget. Because the reason is that if the Congress does not appropriate those funds, it goes to the executive branch. And I think the executive branch in this country is far more powerful than it should be. It's far more powerful, I think, than the framers of this country intended it for it to be. And I think the last thing we want to do is give them more money to run around the world and do God knows what with. So I think that the whole appropriations process is a problem. The one interesting thing about earmarks, though, it's probably the most open part of the budgeting process. I mean, at least we know where the money goes. So I would say that we need to actually overhaul the entire appropriations process.
The Federal Defense of Marriage Act may be coming up for either repeal or renewal. What is your position on this act?
As I mentioned before, I don't think the federal government has any business being in the marriage business, and as a result, I would support the repeal of DOMA.
It's interesting because this is a very issue close to my heart. I'm an interior designer by profession, and when some people say some of their best friends are gay, the vast majority of my best friends are gay, and we've had some very heated arguments about this, or I should say discussions. And one of the things that I have mentioned to them over and over again, and it seems to be it seems to be somewhat persuasive, is that I really do think that most of America, certainly most of California, has no interest in keeping gay couples from making committed relationships. They just have to get over the word marriage. And I know they aren't happy with that, but if in fact marriage is defined by, if it is by definition between a man and a woman, they just have to come up with another word for their union. I do think they should have couples that have been together and have made a commitment to each other. I think it's a Republican value that we want them to be committed to each other and responsible to each other. So I just think they have to get over the word marriage. I was not going to bring this up, but John brought it up in his opening comments. He brought up that I am not in the district, and I should add that I'm 1 block outside the district.
No one says anything about it not being your prerogative, but the fact of the matter is whether you live 1 block, 1 foot, 1 mile, 1 light year, you're outside of the district. And I think that if this whole issue of gerrymandering, are you suggesting that they gerrymandered the district so that you couldn't run against Nancy Pelosi?
No, John.
No,
I'd
okay.
never.
I'm
still asking why would being in the
that's
district
what
not be an issue?
gerrymandering implies. You mentioned before that you think that we have a role in building democracies around the world. There are broadly speaking, 2 different types of foreign policy: non-interventionism and interventionism. I'm a non-interventionist. That's part of the record. I presume you're an interventionist. Can you tell me under what circumstances the United States should intervene militarily in other nations?
Well, that's a very broad question. I do think that we belong in Afghanistan because that's the real question, and I think we belong in Iraq now until we can make them able to stand on their own. And I can't think of any other countries that we would intervene in. Do you have a specific question? But I do very clearly think that we had a reason to go into Afghanistan, and that we've got to clean up the job in Iraq.
Yeah, I think this is the problem with the interventionist foreign policies, that there really are no clear answers. It's sort of wing it and do it as you can. And it's one of the reasons why so many of us have decided that it's better just to make sure that Americans are protected, and that not one red cent, not one red drop of American blood is spent trying to build nations. As far as Iraq is concerned, you know, one of the other concerns that people have is the fact that we get involved in these engagements and we tend to stay. We stay a long time. We've been in Korea for 60 years. We're in Japan for 65 years after World War II. We're in Germany for 65 years after World War II. And so the question is when does it end? This country's bankrupt. And I'm not kidding bankrupt, I mean really bankrupt. We cannot afford to continue to subsidize the national defense of the third most powerful economy in the world, and we cannot afford to subsidize the defense of the fourth most powerful economy in the world. And that's the reason why you have a non-interventionist foreign policy. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat machine don't want to face a Republican candidate who talks about individual liberty, about restraining government, and about protecting all freedoms across the board, the entire Bill of Rights. Nothing about Dana Walsh's campaign frightens the Democrats. They've seen it before. They know how Ms. Walsh performed in 2008. They'd be happy to have her again as the Republican candidate. Now, there's also the legitimate question of Ms. Walsh's fundraising. Now, if you look at her FEC report, it shows that she has spent 90% of the money that she raised on fundraising itself. This is exactly what she did in 2008. This is not money going to fight Nancy Pelosi. This is money that's going to commercial fundraising firms in Virginia and Ohio.
You know, John, you know that at this point in my campaign with my fundraising, you know very well because you tried to get my fundraisers to work for you and they wouldn't. What happens in a campaign like mine is you spend that money in the beginning and you get that money to spend toward the end of the campaign when you need it to fight Nancy Pelosi. But the question is not who is going to be most upsetting to Nancy Pelosi. I think the big question is, who do Republicans want to have represent them? Because I think they don't want a candidate who advocates things like, I think he could be made kind of a laughingstock. He advocates abolishing the IRS.
If you feel the single most important fight we face this year is to reclaim Congress, then you have to understand that San Francisco in this battle is ground zero. It begins here in the home of Nancy Pelosi. Republicans have to do better in 2010, and I think the choice is clear. You can support a candidate whose 2008 campaign speaks for itself, or you can vote for a candidate who's helping to build our party by registering new voters, helping to build our party by enlisting new volunteers, and energizing our base in San Francisco. You can select a nominee who actually lives in the district. And most importantly, a candidate whose positions on key issues will not be a barrier to being heard by the tens of thousands of independents and moderate Democrats whose votes we need in order to win elections in San Francisco. Republicans in San Francisco can have a great year in 2010, but only if we choose the right candidate challenging the most powerful Democrat in Congress. I humbly submit that I am that candidate. I'd be honored to have your support, and I ask for your vote.
And so I think we have a high-profile race where we have to have a Republican that is in front of the entire Republican congressional candidate group throughout the country, and that will make them proud of the person running against Nancy Pelosi.